To talk more about the implications of the Supreme Court presidential immunity decision and what that means for the future, we are joined by Dr. David Barrett, presidential historian and professor of political science at Villanova University outside of Philadelphia. Professor, welcome to the show. From your perspective, how significant is this Supreme Court ruling? We know President Biden certainly finds it disturbing. He made this announcement from the White House hours after the ruling. Let's take a listen.
Today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone.
Professor, what is your opinion? Do you agree or disagree with his view?
Well, I'm doing more a political than a legal analysis. You know, I've studied presidents. They don't actually spend a lot of time reading Supreme Court decisions, reading the Constitution and that sort of thing. They are very much politicians. And it's interesting that President Biden used that kind of language because one wonders if future presidents, one wonders if, say, former President Trump should become President Trump, if he would say, well, this is what Joe Biden said, you know, unlimited power and all that. I think it's going to depend in the future very much on the particular president and what he wants to do with the office. Presidents do tend to have lawyers, not always, but usually, who tell them what they want to hear. And the trend across many decades is the lawyers have said to presidents, yes, you can do this. You have the executive power. You're the commander in chief. So this might open up, I think, somewhat the possibility of presidents using power in a dangerous way. I don't see it as being. I don't think presidents will act as dangerously as President Biden has said. But it is a possibility. It depends on who's president.
The question at the heart of this case is a president immune from criminal prosecution for official acts while in office. Was the question, has that ever arisen in U.S. presidential history before?
You know, I was thinking back about presidents and, you know, and there have been presidents who got into legal, severe political troubles like Clinton and Nixon, especially come to mind. But, you know, mostly this is not something that's really much arisen of presidents, I think, spending time doing the court. You know, when I looked at the opinion, the majority seemed quite concerned with presidents being too hesitant or too passive in fear of being criminally prosecuted. And I just don't see that arising much to the extent we can read the minds of past presidents. And one has to say with someone like Nixon, maybe if he had thought about that, he might have restrained himself a bit. So I don't think it's arisen very much. I don't see it in presidential history.
Well, to that point, just a quick follow-up. Do you think this would have applied to President Nixon in his case?
It's interesting you asked me that question because, you know, my sort of specialty as a political scientist and presidential historian is the sort of post-World War II presidencies, especially through Nixon. And I was thinking to myself, now you know, there's that famous smoking gun conversation that President Nixon had with a couple of high-level White House staffer type people. You know, what if he had called in the Attorney General and said, you know, I'm thinking about directing that this be done. And I'm directing, because the idea of the smoking gun conversation was Nixon telling these staffers to tell the CIA, to tell the FBI to back off from its rather aggressive investigation. So what if Nixon, under the circumstances now in the aftermath of this latest ruling, would Nixon have gotten off? We don't know. The other thing is that what was happening with Nixon was that he was going to be impeached and then almost certainly convicted. So there's the legal and then there's the political.
Right, absolutely. Professor, in her dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor claims this ruling means that a president would be immune from ordering the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival. Again, I know you're a political scientist, but is that your interpretation of this?
Well, I have to say overall, so I read her dissent. And I think in most respects, it's really quite impressive. And it occurred to me when I was reading, you know, the court issues this thing they call a syllabus, which is 10 or 11 page summary of the decision. and then her dissent, and they're pretty readable. And I thought she was pretty impressive, but that struck me as far-fetched.
I am curious on your thoughts on this. What do you think will be the greatest consequence of this ruling on the presidency in the future?
Well, let me start with a Trump presidency. Should Donald Trump win election to another term as president? You know, he did say this thing a couple times. Well, maybe on the first day I'll be, or I'll act like a dictator. So I do wonder what consequences this decision will have on him and in his mind. Keeping in mind, again, presidents don't read Supreme Court decisions and all these things. They're political figures. So I wonder if he is elected, how he was going to understand what this decision means. Because in fairness to the majority, they do say no one is above the law. Presidents are not above the law. So they point out parts in which, you know, the claims of the Trump lawyers were wrong. But how will Donald Trump read this decision? I think that's a very important question.
Well, we so appreciate your historical context on all of this. Professor David Barrett, thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.